The antique watch face read 3:47 when Emma Hayes realized her life was about to change forever. She had no idea that in 13 minutes, her father's SWAT team would mistake her desperate scream for something else entirely. Emma's fingers traced the worn silver edges of her grandfather's watch, a nervous habit she'd developed since the bullying started. The weight of it on her thin wrist felt heavier today, like it was pulling her towards something she wasn't ready for. Grandpa Joe had been a Marine, Dad always said. "Semper Fi," he'd whisper when he thought she wasn't listening, usually after another sleepless night spent replaying his last injury. The watch had survived Normandy, Vietnam, and 3 decades of police work. Now it was timing the countdown to Emma's breaking point. The halls of Westfield High buzzed with typical Thursday afternoon energy. But Emma moved through them like a ghost. Her backpack, stuffed with textbooks that marked her as the class brain, felt like a target painted on her back. She kept her eyes down, counting floor tiles, 143, from her locker to AP Chemistry. She'd counted them so many times, she could navigate blindfolded. "Hayes." The voice cut through her concentration like a blade. Tyler Richardson emerged from behind a pillar, flanked by his usual crew: Mason, Derek, and Cameron. 4 of them, 1 of her. Always 4 of them. Emma's grip tightened on her grandfather's watch. "I have class. If you're feeling that rush of what's going to happen next, hit that like button. It really helps more people discover these stories. And if you want to share where you're watching from, drop it in the comments below. For those who want to support more stories like this one, there's a thanks button right under this video. Every contribution, no matter how small, helps me bring you more inspiring tales of courage and standing up for what's right. Thank you for being here. Now, let's see what happens when push comes to shove. Yeah, we know. Chemistry with Mrs. Peterson, 98% average. Tyler's smile was sharp enough to draw blood. Impressive. Really screwing up the curve for the rest of us normal kids. Normal. The word hit like a physical blow. Emma had spent 16 years trying to be normal, trying to shrink herself small enough to disappear. But apparently, being smart was a crime punishable by daily humiliation. "My dad says colleges are cracking down on grade inflation," Tyler continued, stepping closer. "Says they're looking for more well-rounded students. You know, kids who aren't just book smart." Emma knew what he meant. Tyler's father sat on the school board. He'd made it clear that academic excellence from certain students was creating unrealistic expectations. The kind of expectations that might cost his son an Ivy League spot. "Leave me alone, Tyler. Or what you'll tell Daddy." Tyler's laugh was ugly. "Oh, wait, I forgot. Daddy's been pretty stressed lately, hasn't he? That thing that happened on his last call? Must be tough, having the whole department whispering about whether Commander Hayes still has what it takes." The words hit Emma's chest like ice water. She hadn't known other people were talking about her father's injury, about how he'd frozen for 3 crucial seconds when that gunman turned toward him. 3 seconds that resulted in a bullet in his shoulder and 6 weeks of administrative leave. 3 seconds that had turned her father into a shadow of himself. That's not true. My dad hears things, Emma, board meetings, budget discussions, disability claims, workers' comp. Some people are saying maybe it's time for the old guard to step aside. Emma's world tilted. She'd been so careful, so quiet about the bullying, specifically to avoid adding to her father's stress. She thought she was protecting him. But Tyler's family had tentacles everywhere, including wrapped around her father's career. Mason laughed. the sound echoing off the lockers. Look at her face. Dude, she's about to cry. Don't cry here, Hayes. Tyler's voice dropped to a whisper. Save it for later. We'll give you something to really cry about. They melted away as quickly as they'd appeared, leaving Emma standing alone in the hallway. Students flowed around her like water around a stone, chattering about weekend plans and who was dating whom. Normal teenage problems. Problems she'd trade anything to have. The final bell rang. Emma's footsteps echoed in the emptying hallway as she made her way to chemistry. Mrs. Peterson was already setting up the lab equipment when Emma slipped into her seat in the back row. Always the back row. Less visible there. Today, we're exploring exothermic reactions, Mrs. Peterson announced. The kind that release energy when they occur, sometimes spectacularly. Emma stared at the chemical equations on the board, but her mind was elsewhere. She was thinking about reactions, about pressure building until something had to give, about how even the most stable compounds could become explosive under the right conditions. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Check your email. Emma's stomach dropped. She knew what she'd find before she even opened it. Another photoshopped image of her face on someone else's body. Another fake social media profile designed to humiliate her. Another piece of digital evidence that Tyler's campaign was escalating. But this one was different. This one showed her in compromising positions with a caption that read, Daddy's little snitch, coming soon to a screen near you. Emma's hands shook as she closed the phone. They were threatening to create something that would destroy not just her reputation, but potentially her father's career. A high-ranking police officer's daughter involved in a scandal, real or fabricated, would make headlines, the kind of headlines that ended careers. She looked around the chemistry lab. 28 students bent over their experiments, measuring and mixing, following precise formulas to create predictable results. None of them knew she was drowning. None of them cared that her perfect grades came at the cost of sleepless nights, that her scholarship potential was being systematically undermined by a boy whose father bought his way through life. The watch on her wrist ticked steadily. 3:58. In 2 minutes. Her father would be arriving at the school with his SWAT team for their monthly training exercise. Active shooter drills had become routine since Columbine, since Sandy Hook, since too many other names that made parents wake up screaming. Emma had always found those drills ironic. The school spent hundreds of thousands of dollars preparing for external threats, while internal ones flourished unchecked. Tyler Richardson was more dangerous to her well-being than any external gunman, but he wore a letterman jacket, and his father donated to school programs, so he was invisible to the adults meant to protect her. Another text buzzed, this time with coordinates. Bathroom coordinates. 5 minutes. Come alone. Or everyone sees the video. Emma's blood turned to ice. They didn't just have embarrassing photos. They had video. Real or fake didn't matter in the age of social media. Once something went viral, truth became irrelevant. She raised her hand. Mrs. Peterson, may I use the restroom? Mrs. Peterson barely looked up from her own experiment. Make it quick. We're starting the volatile compounds in 10 minutes. Volatile compounds. How fitting. Emma gathered her things slowly, buying time to think. Her father had taught her basic tactical principles during their weekend camping trips. Always have an exit strategy. Never walk into a situation without knowing how to get out. Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. Everything about this felt wrong. But what choice did she have? The hallway was eerily quiet, as Emma made her way toward the coordinates Tyler had sent. Her footsteps seemed amplified in the empty corridor, each step echoing like a countdown. The bathroom was at the far end of the building, near the old gymnasium that had been converted into storage. A dead zone where security cameras had blind spots and teacher supervision was minimal. Emma paused at the door, her hand on the cold metal handle. Through the walls, she could hear the faint sound of vehicles in the parking lot. Her father's team arriving for their drill. Men and women trained to handle the worst humanity had to offer, preparing to simulate protecting innocent lives. If only they knew one of those innocent lives was about to walk into real danger just 50 yards away. She could still turn around. She could go to the principal's office, demand protection, insist that something be done. But Tyler's father would make a phone call, and suddenly she'd be the problem student with behavioral issues, the troubled teen whose false accusations were clearly a cry for help. Her father would be called in for a conference, forced to face whispers about his fitness for duty and his inability to control his own daughter. Emma thought about her grandfather's watch, about all the dangerous situations it had survived, about courage that ran in her bloodline, courage she'd never had to access before, about the difference between being brave and being stupid. The bathroom door opened before she could make a decision. "There she is." Tyler's voice carried a note of satisfaction. "Right on time." Emma saw the setup immediately. Cameron was positioning a phone to record everything. Mason had positioned himself by the window to watch for teachers. Derek was blocking the only exit, and Tyler stood in the center of it all, holding a second phone that presumably contained the video they were threatening to release. "Welcome to your reckoning, genius girl," Tyler said. "Time to learn what happens when you make the rest of us look bad." Emma's mind raced through options. The tactical training her father had given her was mostly theoretical, but some of it was practical. Size up the opponents, identify the leader, look for weaknesses, create opportunities. Tyler was bigger, but he was overconfident. Cameron was distracted by the recording device. Mason was watching the wrong direction. Derek was closest to the door, but also the smallest of the group. "What do you want?" Emma asked, stalling for time. "What we want," Tyler said, stepping closer, "is for you to understand your place. You're not better than us just because you can memorize a textbook. You're not more deserving of college scholarships just because your daddy taught you to kiss up to teachers. This isn't about college. Everything is about college," Chandler snapped. "You think I don't know what happens when kids like you get full rides? Kids like me get waitlisted. My family has been building toward this for years. Legacy admissions, donations, networking. Then some scholarship kid swoops in and takes spots that should go to people who've earned them." Emma almost laughed at the irony. Tyler thought privilege was something you earned. "Start recording," Tyler told Cameron. "We're going to make a little movie. Emma Hayes apologizing for being such a try-hard. Emma Hayes admitting she's been cheating. Emma Hayes explaining why she's withdrawing her college applications. I'm not doing any of that." "Yes, you are. Because if you don't, this goes viral." Tyler held up his phone, showing a video thumbnail Emma couldn't quite make out. "And trust me, this version is much worse than anything we could film here." Emma's grandfather's watch ticked against her wrist. 4:03. Her father's team would be setting up their equipment now, running through scenarios, preparing for simulated violence. They trained for situations like active shooters, hostage crises, terrorist threats. They didn't train for teenage girls being systematically destroyed by boys who thought the world owed them success. You know what the beautiful thing is, Tyler continued. Even if you report this, nothing happens to me. My dad makes sure of that. But you'll be labeled a troublemaker. Your precious daddy will have to deal with even more stress. Might be enough to push him right over the edge. The threat against her father crystallized something in Emma's mind. She'd spent months trying to protect him by staying silent. But Tyler was going to destroy him anyway. The campaign against her was really a campaign against her entire family, against everything they represented. Emma thought about exothermic reactions, about pressure building until something had to give, about how even the most stable compounds could become explosive under the right conditions. She was done being stable. "Okay," Emma said quietly. "I'll do it." Tyler's smile widened. "Smart girl. Cameron, you getting this?" Cameron nodded, phone raised and recording. Emma looked directly into the camera lens. "My name is Emma Hayes. I'm the daughter of SWAT Commander Michael Hayes, and I want everyone to know exactly what's been happening at this school." Tyler's expression shifted from triumph to confusion. "What are you doing?" "I'm telling the truth," Emma said, her voice growing stronger. "For 4 months, Tyler Richardson and his friends have been systematically harassing me. They've created fake social media profiles, photoshopped images, sent threatening messages, and used their family connections to avoid consequences." "Turn it off," Tyler hissed at Cameron. But Cameron seemed frozen, uncertain whether to obey Tyler or keep recording what was clearly about to become something much bigger than a simple bullying video. "They targeted me because my grades threatened Tyler's class rank," Emma continued. "Because his father believes scholarship students don't deserve the same opportunities as legacy admissions. Because they thought I was weak enough to be destroyed." Tyler lunged toward Cameron's phone, but Emma was faster. Her father's tactical training kicked in as she stepped between them, using Tyler's momentum against him. He stumbled, off balance, as Emma grabbed the phone from Cameron's startled hands. "Give that back," Tyler snarled. "No." Emma backed toward the door, but Derek moved to block her exit. "This ends now." "You have no idea what you're dealing with," Tyler said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "My family owns this town. Your daddy's job, your future, your entire life. We can destroy all of it with a phone call." Emma felt the familiar weight of her grandfather's watch against her wrist. Semper Fi. Always faithful, faithful to truth, to justice, to protecting the innocent. Her father risked his life every day for those principles. Maybe it was time she did the same. "Then destroy it," Emma said, "but everyone's going to know why." Tyler's mask finally slipped completely. The pretense of being a normal teenager fell away, revealing something cold and calculating underneath. "You stupid little bitch! You think you can threaten my family?" He moved toward her with clear intent, no longer caring about witnesses or recordings. This had become personal. And Tyler Richardson was used to getting what he wanted by any means necessary. Emma raised the phone, still recording, capturing Tyler's approach and his words. Evidence. Her father had taught her that evidence was everything in law enforcement. Without it, cases fell apart. With it, justice became possible. "Stay back," Emma warned. "Or what? You'll hit me. Go ahead. Try it. Give me a reason to really hurt you." Tyler was close enough now that Emma could smell his cologne, see the calculating look in his eyes. This wasn't just bullying anymore. This was assault, captured in real time, with witnesses. Emma thought about her father lying in that hospital bed after his injury, whispering that he should have been faster, should have seen it coming. She thought about her grandfather's war stories, about ordinary people finding extraordinary courage when everything depended on it. She thought about the watch on her wrist, still ticking steadily. 4:06, and somewhere in the distance, growing closer. She heard the sound that would change everything, boots on linoleum, moving fast. Voices calling out tactical positions. The SWAT drill was about to begin. But Tyler and his friends had no idea they were about to become part of a very different kind of training exercise. Emma's finger found the emergency contact button her father had programmed into her phone months ago. One touch, and it would send her location along with an automatic distress signal to his unit. She'd never used it before, never wanted to be the kind of daughter who needed rescuing. But as Tyler reached for her, his intentions clear and his backup closing in, Emma realized this wasn't about needing rescue anymore. This was about making sure the truth survived long enough to matter. The phone in her hand was still recording as her thumb moved toward that emergency button. In the distance, the sound of tactical boots grew louder, closer, more urgent. Tyler's hand closed around her wrist, right over her grandfather's watch. "Time's up, genius girl," he whispered. Emma looked him in the eye and smiled. "Actually," she said, "it's just getting started." The emergency button activated with a soft chime that Tyler never heard over his own threatening words. But 47 seconds later, when her father's voice crackled over the radio, saying, "We have a code yellow in Sector 7, all units respond." Tyler Richardson would learn exactly what happens when you threaten the daughter of a man trained to eliminate threats. The SWAT drill was about to become very, very real. The emergency signal traveled through the school's network in milliseconds. But to Emma, time moved like honey. Tyler's grip tightened around her wrist, his fingers digging into the metal band of her grandfather's watch. She could feel the seconds ticking against her skin, each one a countdown to something irreversible. Code yellow, Sector 7. All units respond immediately. Her father's voice crackled through the radio system with military precision, but Emma caught something else underneath the professional tone. Recognition. He knew that signal had come from her phone. Tyler's head snapped toward the speaker mounted in the bathroom corner. "What the hell?" The sound of boots in the hallway grew thunderous, not the casual footsteps of teachers or students, but the synchronized movement of trained tactical officers responding to a threat. Emma had heard that sound 1,000 times during her father's training exercises, but never directed toward her location. "Let go of me," Emma said quietly. Tyler's face had gone pale, but his grip didn't loosen. "You actually called the cops on a school argument. This stopped being a school argument the moment you threatened my family," Emma replied. Her voice was steadier than she felt. "And the moment you decided to drag me into this bathroom to record my humiliation." Cameron still held his phone, but his hand was shaking now. The recording captured everything: Tyler's threats, his admission about using family connections, his physical aggression, evidence that would hold up in any court. "Put the phone down," Derek whispered urgently. "Dude, put it down now." But it was too late for damage control. The bathroom door exploded inward with controlled force. Emma's father entered first, weapon drawn but pointed safely downward, followed by Detective Sarah Chen and 2 other SWAT officers. Their tactical gear made them look like giants in the small space. But Emma had never felt safer in her life. Commander Michael Hayes assessed the scene in seconds, his daughter backed against the wall, wrist still caught in Tyler Richardson's grip, phone recording everything. 4 teenage boys who'd clearly been caught in the middle of something they thought they could get away with. "Release her! Now!" His voice carried the authority of 20 years in law enforcement. Tyler's hand dropped from Emma's wrist like he'd been burned. "Sir, this is just a misunderstanding. We were talking. And step back from my daughter." Detective Chen moved to Emma's side while Commander Hayes kept his attention on the 4 boys. Sarah Chen had worked with Emma's father for 8 years. Had been there the night he was shot. Had seen him struggle with self-doubt ever since, but there was no hesitation in his movements now. No uncertainty in his commands. "Emma, are you hurt?" Detective Chen asked quietly. "No, ma'am, but I have evidence." Emma held up Cameron's phone, still recording. "Everything's on here. The threats, the admission about using family influence, the physical intimidation." Sarah's eyebrows rose. This wasn't a scared teenager anymore. This was someone who'd learned to think tactically under pressure. "We'll need to secure that evidence," she said. "Can you walk me through what happened?" As Emma began explaining. Commander Hayes studied Tyler Richardson with the same intensity he'd use on a suspected terrorist. He'd heard that name before, in school board meetings where concerns were raised about academic pressure and unrealistic expectations. Now those euphemisms took on a darker meaning. "Tyler Richardson," he said. "Board member Richardson's son." Tyler straightened, mistaking recognition for deference. "Yes, sir. My father and the superintendent are close friends. I'm sure we can work this out without involving— Your father's political connections don't apply to criminal assault." Commander Hayes cut him off. "Detective Chen, what do we have here?" Sarah had been listening to Emma's account while simultaneously reviewing the video evidence. Her expression grew darker with each detail. "Systematic harassment, cyberbullying, blackmail, physical intimidation, and conspiracy to create fraudulent evidence. And that's just from the last 10 minutes of recording." Emma pulled out her own phone. "There's more. Screenshots, fake profiles they created, threatening messages. I've been documenting everything for months." Mason stepped forward desperately. "Look, we were just messing around. It's not like we actually hurt her. It's just high school drama." Detective Chen's laugh was cold. High school drama doesn't typically involve coordinated psychological warfare and blackmail campaigns. Commander Hayes felt something shift inside him as he watched his daughter methodically present evidence with the precision of a trained investigator. This wasn't the scared, quiet girl who'd been tiptoeing around their house for months. This was someone who'd inherited tactical thinking and had finally found the courage to use it. "Dad?" Emma said softly. "There's something else you need to know." She pulled up Tyler's earlier threats about his father's concerns regarding Commander Hayes' fitness for duty. As the recording played, Tyler's voice promising to destroy her father's career. Michael Hayes' expression went from professional concern to personal fury. "He threatened your position," Detective Chen asked. "Used official channels to intimidate a minor." "My father hears things," Tyler said quickly, realizing he'd just confessed to something much more serious. "Board meetings, budget discussions. It's not like he was specifically targeting—" "Stop talking," Detective Chen advised. "Right now, before you incriminate yourself further." But Tyler's panic had overridden his judgment. "You don't understand. My family has been planning my college admission for years. Legacy status, donations, connections. Then students like her swoop in with perfect grades and sob stories about needing scholarships. It's not fair. Emma stared at him. After months of psychological torture, Tyler Richardson had just confessed that her intelligence and work ethic were the real crimes in his worldview. Not cheating, not causing trouble, not being disruptive, being better than him. Fairness? Commander Hayes repeated slowly. You think terrorizing my daughter is about fairness? It's about leveling the playing field, Tyler shot back, his mask completely gone now. Kids like her get sympathy points for being smart and poor. Kids like me have to work twice as hard for half the recognition. Detective Chen exchanged looks with Commander Hayes. They'd both seen criminals confess before, but rarely with such entitled arrogance. Cameron, Mason, Derek, she said, I'm going to give you one chance to separate yourselves from this. Were you willing participants in this harassment campaign, or were you following Tyler's lead? Cameron, still holding his phone, was crying now. I just recorded stuff. I didn't know it would go this far. I thought it was just pranks. Mason and Derek looked at each other, then at Tyler, then at the SWAT officers surrounding them. The calculation was simple loyalty to Tyler versus potential criminal charges. He said his dad would protect us, Mason whispered. Said nothing would happen because his family controls the school board. His family, Detective Chen said, doesn't control the criminal justice system. Emma watched the hierarchy collapse in real time. Tyler's power had always been borrowed from his father's political connections, and his followers had been buying into a lie about immunity from consequences. Now, faced with actual law enforcement, that lie was disintegrating. What happens now? Emma asked. Commander Hayes looked at his daughter with a mixture of pride and regret. Pride that she'd found the courage to fight back effectively. Regret that she'd had to face this alone for so long. Now we do our jobs, he said. Detective Chen will process the evidence, interview witnesses, and build a case. The school will be notified that several students are under investigation for criminal harassment, and the school board will receive a detailed report about how their member's son used family connections to enable systematic bullying. Tyler's face had gone gray. You can't do this. My father. Your father, Commander Hayes said quietly, is about to have a very difficult conversation with federal investigators about using official positions to intimidate crime victims. Tyler's voice cracked. Detective Chen smiled grimly. Cyberbullying that crosses state lines becomes a federal crime. Those fake social media profiles you created, they used servers in multiple states. Those threatening messages you sent to your victims' personal devices, interstate communication used to harass and intimidate. The FBI takes that very seriously. Emma felt something loosen in her chest that she hadn't even realized was there. For months, she'd felt powerless against Tyler's systematic campaign. She'd believed his claims about immunity, about his family's protection, about her powerlessness. But watching him crumble under real scrutiny revealed the truth. Bullies were only powerful when their victims had no recourse. There's more, Emma said, surprising everyone, including herself. He's done this before, to other students. I have a list. She pulled up a document on her phone that she'd been secretly compiling. Names, dates, patterns of harassment directed at high-achieving students from lower-income families. Tyler's campaign against her hadn't been personal. It had been systematic. Detective Chen reviewed the list with growing amazement. Emma, this is incredible work. How did you gather all this? I started paying attention after the harassment began, Emma replied. Tyler and his friends would brag about previous targets they'd driven out of advanced classes. They kept digital trophies, screenshots of kids crying, records of academic failures they'd caused, college rejections they'd influenced. Commander Hayes felt his professional admiration override his paternal worry. His daughter had conducted a months-long investigation with the thoroughness of a trained detective. She'd gathered evidence, identified patterns, and documented a criminal enterprise that had been operating under everyone's noses. "Where is this evidence stored?" Detective Chen asked. Emma produced a small external drive from her backpack. Encrypted copies of everything: screenshots, video files, audio recordings, metadata proving timeline and authorship. I learned digital forensics online. Tyler stared at her like she'd grown a second head. "You've been spying on us." "I've been documenting crimes," Emma corrected. "Crimes you committed against me and other students. Crimes you thought you'd get away with because your daddy sits on the school board." The bathroom fell silent, except for the soft hum of the ventilation system. Emma realized that for the first time in months, she wasn't afraid. Not of Tyler, not of his threats, not of the consequences of fighting back. She'd spent so long trying to protect her father that she'd forgotten he'd trained her to protect herself. "Detective Chen," Commander Hayes said formally, "I'm requesting that you take lead on this investigation to avoid any appearance of impropriety." Sarah nodded. "Understood. I'll coordinate with the FBI's cybercrime unit and the district attorney's office. This is going to require extensive investigation across multiple jurisdictions." Emma looked at her father. Really looked at him. For the first time in months. The injury that had shaken his confidence. The whispered doubts about his fitness for duty. The stress she'd been trying to shield him from. None of it mattered now. He was exactly who she'd always believed him to be, someone who stood between innocent people and those who would hurt them. "Dad," she said quietly, "I'm sorry. I didn't tell you sooner." Commander Hayes holstered his weapon and crossed the small space between them. When he hugged his daughter, his hands were shaking slightly. "You did exactly what I would have done. You gathered evidence, identified the threat, and called for backup when you needed it. I'm proud of you." Over Emma's shoulder, he looked at Tyler Richardson with the expression he reserved for the worst criminals he'd encountered. "But this isn't over. Not by a long shot." 3 weeks later, Emma sat in Principal Williams's office alongside her father, Detective Chen, and a representative from the FBI's Cybercrime Division. Across from them sat Tyler's parents, their high-priced attorney, and Tyler himself, who looked like he'd aged 5 years in 21 days. The investigation had uncovered a harassment network that spanned multiple schools in the district. Tyler had been coordinating with similar groups at other schools, sharing techniques and targeting strategies. What had started as privilege-protecting college admission interference had evolved into a sophisticated psychological warfare operation. "The evidence is overwhelming," Agent Martinez from the FBI explained. "Coordinated cyberbullying campaigns, identity theft, harassment using electronic communications, conspiracy to commit fraud, and intimidation of witnesses. We're looking at federal charges that carry serious prison time." But Tyler's father, board member Richardson, had already resigned his position pending his own investigation for ethics violations and intimidation of crime victims. The family's immunity was revealed to be nothing more than small-town politics that crumbled under federal scrutiny. However, Agent Martinez continued, "Given the defendants' ages and their cooperation with the investigation, the U.S. Attorney is prepared to consider a plea agreement." Tyler's lawyer leaned forward eagerly. What kind of agreement? Full cooperation in identifying other victims and network participants. Testimony against adult co-conspirators who enabled this behavior. 5 years of probation with mandatory counseling and community service. Permanent restriction from social media platforms. And most importantly, a formal apology and restitution to every victim. Emma watched Tyler's face as his lawyer explained that accepting the plea would mean admitting guilt publicly, having a federal conviction on his record, and spending the next 5 years under court supervision. The entitled confidence he'd worn like armor was completely gone. "What about the other students?" Emma asked. "Cameron, Mason, and Derek have already accepted similar agreements," Detective Chen replied. "They've provided extensive testimony about how the network operated and identified 12 other victims across 3 schools." Principal Williams cleared his throat uncomfortably. The school district is also implementing new policies based on Emma's recommendations, anonymous reporting systems, digital monitoring protocols, and coordination with law enforcement for cyberbullying incidents. Emma had spent the weeks since Tyler's arrest working with school administrators to design programs that would actually address systematic harassment rather than just react to individual incidents. Her proposal combined digital forensics training for staff, peer advocacy networks, and clear protocols for involving law enforcement when criminal behavior was identified. "There's one more thing," Commander Hayes said. "Emma has been accepted to a summer program with the FBI's Cybercrime Division. They're interested in her investigative work and digital forensics skills." Emma smiled. For months, she'd been afraid that her academic achievements would be destroyed by Tyler's campaign. Instead, her response to that campaign had opened doors she'd never imagined. Tyler looked up for the first time during the meeting. "Why did you do it?" he asked quietly. "Why didn't you just transfer schools or drop out of advanced classes? Why did you fight back?" Emma considered the question seriously. "Because you were wrong," she said finally. "About me? About what I deserved? About what intelligence means? About who gets to succeed? And because there were other kids you were planning to target. Someone had to stop you." "But I could have destroyed your father's career, your family's reputation, your college chances." "You tried to do all of that anyway," Emma pointed out. "Fighting back was the only way to stop you from succeeding." Tyler's mother spoke for the first time. "I want to apologize to you and your family. We should have known, should have stopped this sooner." 6 months later, Emma stood at a podium in the same auditorium where Tyler had once expected to be valedictorian. She'd been invited to speak at the district's new anti-bullying summit, sharing her experience with students, parents, and educators from across the region. "Bullying isn't always what we think it looks like," she began. "Sometimes it's not physical violence or obvious cruelty. Sometimes it's systematic, sophisticated, and designed to destroy someone's opportunities rather than just hurt their feelings. The most important thing I learned is that bullies depend on isolation. They want you to believe you're alone, that no one will help you, that the system protects them and not you. But that's a lie. The system works when we make it work. When we gather evidence, when we speak truth, when we refuse to suffer in silence." After her presentation, a girl approached Emma nervously. She was small, quiet, clearly uncomfortable being the center of attention. Emma recognized the look. She'd worn it herself for 16 years. "I think something like this is happening to me," the girl whispered. "But I don't know how to prove it." Emma smiled and handed her a card. "My name is Emma Hayes. I run a peer advocacy program now. We're going to teach you everything you need to know." As she walked with the girl toward the resource tables, Emma felt the weight of her grandfather's watch on her wrist, still ticking steadily, still marking time, still connecting her to a legacy of service and protection. But now she was writing her own chapter in that legacy, not as someone who needed rescuing, but as someone who knew how to fight back effectively, gather evidence patiently, and use the system to protect others who couldn't protect themselves. The watch had survived Normandy, Vietnam, and 20 years of police work. Now it was timing something new, the transformation of victims into advocates, the replacement of silence with truth, and the discovery that sometimes the smartest thing you can do is refuse to be quiet about injustice. Emma Hayes was no longer just surviving high school, she was changing it. That evening, Emma sat at her desk working on college application essays. The question prompt asked about overcoming challenges, and she found herself writing not about being bullied, but about discovering that intelligence without courage was just potential waiting to be wasted. Her father knocked softly on her door. "How's the writing going?" "Good," she said, looking up from her laptop. "I'm writing about learning that protection isn't just something you receive. Sometimes it's something you provide." Commander Hayes smiled, recognizing his own philosophy reflected in his daughter's words. "Your grandfather would be proud." Emma touched the watch on her wrist, feeling its steady rhythm. "I think he always knew I'd figure it out eventually." Outside her window, Westfield High stood quiet in the darkness. But Emma knew that tomorrow it would be different, safer, better, because sometimes one person's refusal to stay silent could change everything for everyone who came after. The watch kept ticking, marking time toward a future where smart, determined students like Emma Hayes would never have to face their battles alone.